Okay, everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the November Return to the Vault program. We're excited to present this legislative update for all real estate practitioners and glad to have Nancy Ferguson here as our speaker today. My name is Matt Waters. I'm an attorney at Jordan Price Law Firm in Raleigh. I'm currently the chair of the real property section and also of the Return to the Vault program. And I'm glad to be joined today also by my co-host Kyle Smalling with Capital City Law, who is a co-chair with me with the Return to the Vault program. Kyle, if you're with us, you can unmute and say hello.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Glad to be here.
All right, I see a lot of familiar faces in the participant list, but also some new ones. So for those of you who've been with us before, welcome back. We're glad to have you. And for those who are with us for the first time, we're glad to have you as well. So just a few notes about the Return to the Vault program. This is something that we created in 2022. It's a new way for us to sort of connect with our membership and to provide content and information that we think is beneficial to section members and practitioners all over the state. Something new that we've been able to do this year that in fact we weren't able to do last year is we've been able to cross promote or sort of cross collaborate with other sections within the NCBA to provide programs and content along with other sections. And so we're reaching a broader audience by doing that and hopefully helping section members, members of the NCBA and practitioners all over the state. These are monthly 1-hour programs hosted at noon on the second Wednesday of each month. These programs are all recorded and they're provided as section content for all section members. I think Nancy's got a slide that she'll share in just a few moments, which I think is a great slide to show you how you can find these programs. These programs are not offered for CLE credit. I do have to say that. One additional thing I want to note about the Return to the Vault program, which I think is pretty neat. So yesterday, we had our second council meeting of the new bar year. And I learned after the council meeting, actually, that the Return to the Vault program is now the North Carolina Bar Association's #1 program by way of attendance and participation. And that certainly wouldn't be possible at all without the many great presenters that we've had, the great content that we're able to share with you because of those presenters, and also, you know, because of our sponsors and certainly all of you who have always been very excited about this program and who participate and join us every month. So thank you to everybody who's had a hand in helping this program be a success.
Does make a difference.
Quick programming announcement. The real property section forms manual. I hope you all saw our announcement about that. That forms manual has now been published and is available both in electronic form and in a print hard copy form. We are able to offer the first 100 folks who download that electronic version $100 credit or discount from the charge.
Yeah.
We've got about 60 days window within which you can do that and take advantage of that $100 credit, and then any money left over that we've not spent yet on that $100 discount, we're going to purchase some hard copy forms manuals and give those away at different events. Probably going to take December off for the Return to the Vault program, as we've historically done. That December is always a very busy month for year end, wrapping things up, and also with holidays and family. So probably take December off. We would return back with everybody in January on the 10th. February 10th next year at 7 p.m., which will be here before we know it. That's the Carolina Hurricanes hockey game. So back by popular demand, we did this last year. We're giving away tickets again. So as you saw in the programming announcement and flyer for this program, everybody who's in attendance today will be given an extra entry into the drawing. So we're going to have another link that's going to be sent out, most likely in case you missed it, email for this program. That link will have a place where you can enter in again, or for those that weren't able to join us today, that will be provided another opportunity for folks to enter in their names for the drawing. We'll probably draw names somewhere around December 1st and make announcements after that point in time for the folks who had their name drawn. Going to draw about 25 or 26 names, give away 2 tickets to each winning entry. So if you don't get your name drawn right away, don't have any fear, because as what happened last year, in several cases, we drew winning names, handed out tickets, and then, you know, plans changed. Those folks weren't able to attend. They passed their tickets back in, and then we distributed those tickets down the list of the names that have been drawn. Just stick tight, and we'll get that drawing hopefully by the end of this month. February 16th, next year, we've got the Real Property Hot Topics. And then, of course, as I always like to announce, May 17th and 18th in Asheville next year, our annual meeting. So go ahead and mark your calendars for that and make your plans to attend. If everybody who is not already muted could just please mute your microphones. We're getting audio feedback from several folks who are in attendance with us today. I want to make sure that everybody's able to hear Nancy when she begins her presentation. I want to say a quick thank you to Chicago Title, our sponsor for today's program. So everybody stick around to the end of today's program. 20 lucky attendees will each receive a $25 gift card courtesy of Chicago Title. Again, want to welcome everybody to this program. Just give another reminder for everybody to please mute. And if Sherrod, if you're still with us, and I know he's in a council meeting simultaneous with this meeting, so he may not be able to hear us, but if he can help to mute folks as they come in, that will help with the audio for this program. So with that, I will turn things over then to Nancy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to share my screen now, I hope. Okay, great. I'll tell you what, we have these regular calls in the company, and they always remind everybody that you're being recorded. And since we're about to do some legislation, which may not be the favorite thing that you want to hear, you might really, really want to make sure you're muted. So if you have some exasperated scream, it won't be on the permanent recording for everybody else to hear. And I promise I will keep my part of it without too many expletives if I can. The first thing you see here, just to let you know, this is what Matt was talking about. All of you should be Real Property Section members, hopefully, and you can get onto the My Communities page. It used to be the listserv, and now it's the listserv and a lot of other things. And I did the screenshot so you could see how many important things are there. It's not just the Real Property approved forms. The minutes from the meetings are there. We don't have newsletters anymore, but some of the older ones are still on there. And then, of course, the materials and the recordings for the Return to the Vault, a lot of other things that go along with all the activities that the section does. And it's tremendous. If you haven't read any of the minutes before, you should, just because you'll see how busy this section is. And I would be remiss if I didn't also say, everything that we do legislatively, it takes a whole community, and we do have an effect. I'll mention that a couple of times as we go through. But Matt, for example, as chair now, our prior chairs, Lindsay Paris Thompson, Biz Harrison, David Woods. I mean, I could go down the list with all the people who have still currently been very, very active and have made a difference this year. If for no other reason, you notice the notary journal for paper notaries was rescinded. So things like that matter. That's why your voice and participation is so important. Otherwise, John McLean, we'll talk about Peter Muller and Kyle Smalling, who helped so much with the MV Realty. The Real Property Council, I mean, everybody puts in a hand. Jim Saint Sing helped with drafting a lot of these statutes. We've had input from Carl Knight, from several people with different title companies. I actually push on my people a lot to help. So our 8 attorneys have been very active as well and very helpful. So it takes a community, and everything that people do to help, it matters. This is an upcoming session, just so you know. It's kind of an odd thing to know, but they bounce in and out, or gavel in and out, as they say. And this is the schedule upcoming through April of 2024. So you'll see we'll be bouncing in and out to try to respond. And now I'll just go through the quickies of what just happened. Sort of a simplistic thing, the permitting and GC licensing, there was a major statute that changed. I'm not going to go through all the residential code and all those things. I'm trying to stick mostly to title issues. But the change was for permitting. It's now a threshold of 40,000, not 30. And the same thing applies to liens NC. So that'll be changing in some of the materials that we share with you guys. And for your clients who have to get building permits. MV Realty. Some of you may have seen these in the statute. They're called unfair real estate agreements. It's for residential real estate. And these are situations, the MV Realty specific example is where there's a memorandum put on that says you must list your property with me if you're going to sell it for the next 40 years for a payment of 3%, i.e. part of the half of the commission, the typical commission. And I'm not going to talk about the NAR litigation today. So that's not part of our legislation. But we did get this statute passed. Again, we had a lot of people involved in getting this communicated with the legislature and getting it done. The Attorney General's office has filed an action against MV Realty to try to stop these. And I think effectively they're not happening anew, but we got the statute. The statute is not retroactive. It has a generic definition of what an unfair real estate service agreement is, which is one that's for over a year, purports to run with the land, would allow assignment without the owner even knowing or consenting, and would create a lien or encumbrance. And it's not for things that you normally think of, like a home warranty or assessments for your HOAs, mechanics liens. It's not for those exemptions, and you see the list there. It's for a, quote, service agreement that has nothing to do with improving or maintaining the property. So prospectively, from the effective date, August 24th of this year, any of them are void. But retroactively, we're still under the AG's action. And unfortunately, MV Realty filed a mass of bankruptcies in Florida. And here again, I would tell you that Peter Mueller has been great. He has gotten with one of his former partners in Florida, who's been very helpful in helping us keep up to date with what's going on with those bankruptcies. Our Attorney General has been very proactive and has sought a relief from stay so that they can continue with their injunction against the North Carolina contracts to help us keep helping these people do their closings. But right now that's in limbo, and we may not know for a couple of more weeks what the bankruptcy court in Florida is going to do. We understand the bankruptcy judge is very sophisticated. It's a complicated bankruptcy because their only asset, MV Realty's only asset, are all these homeowner contracts for 40 years all over the country. And they have a huge mortgage. Well, it's not a mortgage, a huge one big secured creditor. So if you think about that in bankruptcy terms, it's very complicated to try to determine how the judge is going to go find assets to pay that debt when the assets are these consumer, we would call them unfair contracts that should be void and unenforceable. And many states have already declared that. So that's the story on that as they come up. Remote electronic notarization. I'm sure all of you have heard a lot about that. for the last couple of years. And of course, the legislation this year was to extend the emergency video notarization, as well as do some more clarifying and conforming things so that, and at one point it did have in there that the notary journal was going to be required for all notaries. Thank you for those of you who stepped up, and the Secretary of State listened, the legislature listened. They withdrew that mandate for paper notaries. Now, electronic notaries, whether remote or in person, those are all electronic in this state, still have to have a journal, an electronic journal. And there were some other clarifying provisions. All of us who have electronic notaries, the e-notaries, are going to have to get new training anyways, so we'll wait on that part of it. But the rulemaking is going on right now. And here's the website where you can go in. There's going to be 3 phases of rules. The first one's already done. The second one just got posted earlier this week, November 1st, and is now open for public comment. You see that here. The deadline is January 2nd, and there's a public hearing November 28th. We do want input so that the section can provide a response. The key person for that is Jason Peltz, who has been working on this diligently since all of this first came up several years ago. And he's even stayed on to help the council, even though he's fulfilled his full 3-year term. So again, that's Jason Peltz. And if anybody needs his email, etc., I'm happy to send it to you, as any of us would, because we do want input, but so does the Secretary of State, and there's an email address there at that link. Just a note, foreign notarization, the Hague Convention, those of you who have to deal with things out of state, China just became, their joinder of the Hague Convention just became effective yesterday. And Canada is finally, at long last, going to join the Hague Convention as well, and theirs takes effect January 11th. Now, these are not real estate issues, but they are definitely attorney issues. I'm just going to highlight a few things. This is what we call the budget bill, the 2023 Appropriations Act, that was so debated. These were provided. Thank you, Michelle Fraser at the bar. She provided these provisions, and the numbers at the left are the page numbers in the bill. So you can see how big the bill is and why having page numbers is extremely helpful. So, because this is the entire state budget bill. So if you'll look at those, the things I want to highlight really for us today are the State Bar, page 537, the State Bar Review Committee. There are some new people, there's a whole new committee whose job is just to look over the State Bar's shoulder about how they do what they do, especially grievances. On page 538 of the bill, our bar dues are probably going up. It says not to exceed $325. Page 539, though, your district bar dues are probably going up because it says they shall be $90. And a lot of the district bars dues were not that high, but that's how it reads. There are new additions, page 539. There are now some new seats on the Disciplinary Hearing Commission at the State Bar, and those will be appointed by the legislature primarily. But the good news, page 614, GS 105-41, which is your $50 a year privilege tax on attorneys and other professionals, has been repealed. So they give it and they take it away. North Carolina has a Farm Act every year, and this year is no exception. But the key real estate things are just amendments to the timber larceny and timbering and riparian buffer provisions, which are amendments from what was done, I think, last year or the year before, and clarification on definitions of wetlands. And those are the 2 section numbers in that very large bill. There are some business corporation amendments. These were promoted by the Bar Association, and they're one of the, unfortunately, few bills from the Bar Association that made it through the 2023 legislature, but they're not real estate related per se. So I'll just give you the header here for those of you who are interested in business opportunity sellers and shareholder rights. You may want to read Senate Bill 477. So the legislature has been otherwise engaged than in doing real estate matters this year. So that's the end of what's happened related to real estate practice, but there's a lot more that is in process, and that's where I want to really focus today. So just keep in mind what I'm about to tell you may not be what is actually the law at this point. These are issues that we have got to watch out for. Again, remember, it takes a community. We really need your input for a lot of these things, not just the RENA, remote electronic notary, comments and rulemaking, but these upcoming things. And this is where I hope everybody really is muted, because some of these things are going to be hot topics that you're going to have negative comments about. I can't help it. It just is what it is. Voila. Not going into detail about the AOC Odyssey portal. I will refer you to earlier Return to the Vaults, that presentations that have already been done. But from a legislative perspective, there's a lot of conversation going on, given the problems that we continue to have. There are a lot of background conversations, and hopefully the legislature itself will be in a position to listen to what's going on. As you probably know, the third phase is going to go live February 5th. And that's 12 counties down east. So that's your northeastern quadrant over there. And they have already posted that the fourth group is going to go. They don't have a date on it yet, but the fourth group is going to be this triad area. So you'll be on the lookout for that as well. We're hoping that there will be continued enhancements that will help us be able to weather this storm. But the other two conversations that are going on are, if we can't get a reliable search engine that is user-friendly, that we can know how to deal with reliably to get information, what can we do to protect customers, clients, third parties, the public, creditors, banks, everyone who relies on the Odyssey portal, among other things. One of the discussions is, what about a third-party search engine that basically does what a title plant, and I hate even saying that word, but a search engine that would buy the data, the raw data from the AOC, and generate searches in a way that we understand. And the problems, of course, with that, or anything like anything else, or who will pay for it. It would have to be initiated, it would have to be staffed, it would be an ongoing, it would need to be real time. There's a lot of contract issues with that. The other idea that we talked about initially, and I've heard somebody else is still talking about, is forcing all documents affecting real estate to be recorded in the Register of Deeds. And I know they do that in Maine, but it's a very different system. And the problem with that is what about everything that's already out there? Hundreds of thousands of documents in the clerk's office, because we have this bifurcated system. How do we get the message out that everybody's going to have to pull everything? They're going to have to create new laws, for example, in a foreclosure, a special proceeding, a new law to put some new document in there to record in the Register of Deeds vault. How do you go back and get all that from all the things that have already been there, which would affect our titles? Because as we know, some may not, but we know old documents affect our titles right up to today. That's what a title search is. So those are some of the sort of quandaries of things going out there if we can't get some help with this. I do want to point out one reminder though, as these counties go online, the NCLTA, the Affidavit of Understanding and Indemnity and Hold Harmless, that's about protecting you and your clients. It gets the indemnity from the seller that they haven't done anything, a reiteration of that, a stronger reiterization than just the warranties in a deed, assuming they're even given any, and more than just about mechanics liens. This is about, in other states, we get title affidavits regularly. And this, so we just have never done that here, but this sort of fills that piece of the gap. It's also a disclosure that you, the searching attorney and paralegal, cannot guarantee that you can find things once these counties migrate. And it's not just during the blackout period. As you know, it's ongoing. And that's why this is so important, so that clients understand that it's not on you that you can't find this stuff. So that's the two-part piece of this, and I'm happy to discuss it. I'm sure any of us are with anyone that has quandaries about that. Okay. And I'm glad everybody muted, because that was the big one. It gets a little easier maybe for a little bit. The General Statutes Commission is a standing committee of the General Assembly. It's under, I think it's under the AG's office, not of the Senate, not of the House, but of the General Assembly overall. And they look at typically uniform acts once passed by the Uniform Laws Commission, but they also help us, as many of you know, with technical corrections on a regular basis. And they've been so wonderful with
Okay.
us over the years, helping us with that.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye.
And somebody, I just heard you talking to your client on the phone. So, by the way, a couple of the ones that they're working on right now, they have worked with us. The conveyances between spouses update, and that was a technical correction. I mean, it's got actually a substantive meaning, but right now it's still sitting. It's Senate Bill 112. It may crossover, but we just hope it'll be passed. There's nothing really controversial about it. It's been heavily discussed, including with the family law section, because you'll see GS 50-20, which is the Equitable Distribution Act, is involved. The Uniform Community Property Disposition at Death Act should not be, I don't think, controversial here. It's giving us information when people come in and they have had community property, which they sold, and they've now bought property here, but they want it to remain community property. And a shout out to John McLean on this one. We got in there a provision to make this clear on record here, since that's not our presumption. Our presumption would be if husband and wife took title that it's tenants by the entirety, but they can elect for it to be community property, which changes it dramatically. Its ownership, its title, but they have to give notice, so we would know about it. Others that are on the agenda, the Uniform Electronic Wills Act, there is a North Carolina version that the General Statutes Commission and Estate Planning have been working on for several years, and it's about final, but then along came the Uniform Electronic Estate Planning Documents Act, and so it decided that they would just introduce them both at the same time. They need to work with the clerks. They need to work with estate planning and a lot of other groups. So they're working on integrating those two and getting them in a North Carolina format. The Uniform Easement Location Act, no docket was opened. It was discussed for quite some time, and it just did not, we just did not push it, honestly. The Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC, there's a new provision for emerging technologies. And we have two people, commercial attorneys on our Real Property Section Council, David Martin and Paul Fogelman, who are going to be looking into that to help give some input from our perspective. The Uniform Unlawful Restrictions in Land Records Act, those are discriminatory covenants. This is a uniform law. It's been heavily negotiated over the last few years, even though it's on a fast track. I think it's a very good format for the act. It just now came to the General Statutes Commission, so we're just now really, they haven't even opened a docket on it. They haven't voted on it yet because they haven't had time. It's just brand new. And Uniform Special Deposits Act, those of you who hold any money for clients or trusts or guardianships, that may be of interest to you. So you'll probably want to take a look at that. Again, there's no docket yet. This is the other big bear in the woods. Many of you have heard that a lot of other states have adopted statutes that would either prohibit or seriously regulate ownership of real property, typically agricultural, by certain foreign entities. Those statutes can take several different versions. The federal, they have to register if they own it. Some states have registration and some type of divestiture. Some of you may have seen in the news recently in Arkansas, they are now going after Syngenta, who many of you may know from North Carolina because we are their Syngenta U.S. headquarters. Because Syngenta was bought, it was formerly Ciba-Geigy, but it was bought by a Chinese company that's owned by primarily by the Chinese government. There are, I think, now up to 24 states that may have these, 14 of these just last year. All of them, some of them impact all property in a state. Most of them are focused on agricultural land, but some of them, like North Carolina, are focused on military or critical infrastructure. And I'm going to get to that detail of the bill. It's not enacted yet, but the bill in North Carolina. But you can see a lot of different states have enacted these foreign ownership limitations. Federally, there's foreign acquisitions and landholding in agricultural land, which has been in place since 1978. And in 2024, the National Defense Authority Act was amended yet again. They do that every few years, I think. And there are legal issues with that, like divesting people of their property without equal protection of the law based on ethnic origin, etc. Some of them say it is certain places like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Others say it's based on the federal statute. But again, here's the issue. You're the closing attorney. How do you know? How do you know who the buyer is, that who they're run all the way up the title? How do you know that there's not some Chinese company back there or Iranian whatever that's pulling the strings, even if they don't appear in the equity ownership of the entity? Because, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But this was the classic one where it popped up. Northrop Seed King Seed. I mean, Northrop's been around. Syngenta's been here, I don't know, 40 years or more. But it is now owned by China National Chemical Company, or ChemChina, which is, we now know, a Chinese state-owned company. What we look for in these acts, and what didn't happen in the North Carolina one, which is our problem, is a divestiture proceeding, due process, notice hearing. These are the things we have here. Granted, we're dealing with someone who may be a foreign national, but we don't know that. It's not always clear. And the initial thought was it would just be voided. But I ask you, how do you, if somebody just voids a transaction you just did, what does that mean? Does that mean the seller gets their property back because it never went to that void purchaser? And then what happens with the money that got paid to the seller? And what does the tax office do? And how do you, the attorney, either know it's gone back to the seller or figure out how to undo it of record if the seller is your client? There needs to be some procedure for it to happen. And we have all kinds of paradigms for that. So that's what the American Land Title Association has come up with, a model act that addresses these things, but these are the discussion points. The second thing is who should be able to do it. So should any, as they say, Tom, Dick, or Harry be able to go in and say, well, I think you're a foreigner and I don't want you here. We think it should be an attorney general or someone with enforcement authority, investigative power, a governmental authority, if they're going to divest them solely because of the ownership backup in the title, the equity. They should provide a procedure, how it's going to be documented in the public records for real estate. The goal is that third parties who don't know this, innocent purchasers, lenders, your closing attorneys, that they shouldn't be caught flat-footed because somebody found this out and you didn't and couldn't. It needs to protect lien holders, and it needs to protect the titles so that it doesn't invalidate a title that's already been searched, used, cleared, sold, whatever. Shouldn't go back to retroactively start undoing what seemed to be legitimate former transactions. So that's a mouthful. Now I'll move a little faster. Nonprofits. This is a bill. Again, the ones I'm talking about now, these are all bills. They're all things that are in process. They're not done. This is not a new one. There was a proposal several years ago for nonprofits to file annual reports. How many times have you tried to find who's on a current HOA, for example, or a church or whoever, and you have no idea even where to start because they haven't filed anything in 30 or 40 years. So the goal was that they would have to file a very simple annual report. And any of you who've done this, you know how easy it is to file an annual report and to do it for free. No filing fee on these. So that's what's in the statute. Now, again, if it's going to go through the Secretary of State's office, there's going to have to be some appropriation to them from the legislature to be able to do that. But that's the goal. This bill also has a lot of provisions about foreign nonprofits and domestication of nonprofits and mergers here in North Carolina. And it did make crossover. Obviously, it would have to have an appropriation component, but that's House Bill 741. Community associations, there are quite a few bills that are still in limbo and still being discussed. As you know, there's a lot of volatility on both sides about what should happen, what shouldn't happen, what should HOAs be able to do, and maybe some, arguments in cases of some being abusive, but in other cases, and I say this because my mother lived in townhouses for the last 50 years, you need an HOA to pave the roads and to do the things that need to be done, and they're homeowners too. So there's a lot of back and forth about what happens and what they're going to and what should be restricted and what shouldn't. Do the good guys not get protected? Well, who's the good guy? Also, there's another bill about prohibition on restrictions on rentals in HOAs, planned communities or condos. Again, it has not been finalized and all of these things are still up in the air. But the one thing that did happen was House Bill 311, creating the House Select Committee on HOAs. Don't think there is one yet created, but the statute is there and the structure. So keep on that. We do have an active community association committee of the real property section. 2 foreclosure provisions that are still in process. One is remote bidding and foreclosure auctions. This got tacked on to House Bill 542, which is primarily an HOA bill, but it's a foreclosure bill because it's about having remote bidding and auctions at more extended places than the courthouse steps. House Bill 469 was to extend the Service Member Protections Act consistent with the federal statute. But again, both just bills, not passed. Real-time payments, FedNow, those are all being looked at. And again, there's the Uniform Acts they're looking at. And these are here now in lesser amounts, but we all are going to have to look closely at those for the Good Funds Settlement Act and to make sure you do have good funds if you're relying on it and getting set up. Can you do it with your trust account? How's it going to work? This is a non-controversial bill, I think. It is the statutory implementation of the case law on tenancies in common, much like was done with the joint tenancies in conveyances between spouses. This is the tenancy in common, the hope to bring it all into one bill that talks about what is tenancy in common. And again, I think it's non-controversial, but it made it through crossover and is still sitting. Again, a shout out to Jim Saintsing, who worked very hard on that bill. It was heavily negotiated. Estate planning was trying to come up with most of these, I think. But transfer on death deeds, this is a uniform act. It's been brought up in our legislature several times over the years, like we have 2-year sessions, as you probably know, long session and then the related short session. It gets brought up every year. Estate planning has been great about pointing out the issues, and real property has as well, because we have some similar issues. And it seems like every time it comes up, we bring up the issues and then it just dies. But we're starting to see people pulling transfer on death deeds off the internet and having no idea what it is they're doing, what they mean, because we don't have the legislative foundation for it. So we'll keep an eye out for that and see what happens. And even though it didn't make crossover, many of you probably already know, just because something doesn't make crossover does not mean that somebody can't decide that they want to tack it onto another bill that did, or gut another bill that did. And suddenly something will rise like a phoenix and end up being before the legislature again. And a couple of last minute things here. Tax foreclosure proposal. Some of you may have seen the Charlotte case, In re Ryan, Mecklenburg County, I guess, versus Ryan. And she was a lady who was disabled. The sheriff went by her house and said nobody lived there. It looked vacant. And so they didn't get good service on her. And another division of the county had her email address and didn't email her, and she was very disabled, and she specifically told them she really needed that. And so her foreclosure got set aside when the buyer went by there to get her out, and she was still there, which, by the way, is why most of us, when we look at any foreclosure, we're always wondering who's on the property, because if the owner is still there, there might be something wrong. The In re George case was an HOA foreclosure. Again, the court came back that they had an email address. There were other ways they could have reached them, and they should have done that. So we were approached from, I guess, the county commissioners and several of the county's attorneys about helping them with doing a tax foreclosure proposal to clarify how that service is done. And involved in the Ryan case also was her inability to get a certification from the tax office. You've all experienced this, I'm sure. If you've done this for any time, where you go in and you want a certification from the tax office of exactly what's due on the taxes, and it's not always easy to get. So they're looking at both of those. We'll look further at that tax proposal when it comes up. And last but not least, we're all seeing and being inundated with, and I know all the companies are sending you stuff about deed fraud, about seller impersonation. We've had all these fraudulent deeds, and I'm not kidding. I'm seeing it all the time. If I could tell you anything today that you hear, look at that seller's deed. Don't just assume if there's a notary that it's okay. Ask yourself, why is that notary in Florida and the seller's in Michigan and the property is here and their tax address is in Virginia? Something is not right. Watch it. But what this is looking at, there are a lot of states who are starting to come up with deed fraud legislation. And the point of that being an expedited procedure. Once something's proven fraudulent, that's water over the first dam. But then how do you get that title cleaned up again? How do you get that fraudulent deed off? Florida just enacted a statute. There are several other states who were looking at an expedited procedure to be able to help that innocent landowner get that fraudulent deed off their title. Now, the flip side is, what if the landowner's not innocent and it's a legitimate deed? You don't want to make it such simple a process that they can just try to do it unilaterally. But that's an upcoming issue and a very hot issue, because this is like one of the biggest sources of frauds and losses that everybody's having right this minute. So last but not least, we are all a community. It takes everybody's insights, thoughts, input. All these bills are online. I put the website there, ncleg.gov/legislation. You look up the bill number, that you can look up bill text to try to find a particular statute you're interested in. If you use, some of the statute systems like LexisNexis or Westlaw, they may flag that there's a bill regarding a particular statute you might be looking at. So keep on top of that. Keep in touch with your real property section. I showed you the community's website. Try to see what's going on with things. And as you learn about issues out there, let us know, because sometimes the best information we get is from people who are out there, like the Notary Journal issue that popped up and got resolved. So let's keep those conversations going.
All right, Nancy, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Get my correct screen up. Nancy, as always, that was a wonderful program, and it's just such important information. And I think it's just so important to emphasize, as you said, that it does take a community, it does take the voice of the section and all of the section's members to help with this legislative process. We had over 90 participants in this program, and I just wanted to say again how thankful I am for all of you who continue to attend and support this program, for the many great presenters and speakers that we've had, including Nancy, who's presented multiple times, the sponsors of these programs. What's funny is that we were told a couple years ago by the NCBA that the real property section was the least active section within the Bar Association, even though we're the largest section. And I think now that they're telling us that this program is the most attended and participated program that the Bar Association has, I think that maybe by definition makes us now the most active section. So I'm glad to see that that happen. Feedback on this program, or if you're interested in getting involved with the section or want to serve on council or on a committee, or if you have ideas for future content, please send me an email there. As I said in the chat box, these program materials will be made available to everybody who attended, and all section members for that matter. Be on the lookout for the "in case you missed it" email, which would go out with a copy of this recording and also the program materials. As Nancy showed you in one of her first slides, there you can access any past Return to the Vault program within the real property section community webpage as a place to look for that content. Just another, quick reminders. I want to say one more thing about the Hurricanes hockey tailgate. We did this last year. I think it was a lot of fun. Got a lot of good feedback about that. That's why we're doing it again this year. The tailgate would be, of course, before the game, and we really think that that's a great opportunity for everybody to come and to network and meet. Many of the executive committee members will be in attendance. Sherrard Johnson, our community manager, will be in attendance. It's just a good way to meet people from across the state, or reconnect with people from across the state who you might not get to see face to face on a regular basis. And of course, anybody is welcome to attend the tailgate. We'll advertise and publicize more about the tailgate as we approach. Old Republic Title is going to be sponsoring the tailgate this year, so we're glad to have their participation, and we'll look forward to that in February. So with that, I will turn things back over to Nancy and want to thank Chicago Title again for sponsoring this program. Again, Nancy is with Chicago Title. She's Vice President, Senior State Counsel with Chicago Title. I also saw Rob Markworth in the participant list. There maybe was one or two others with Chicago Title. So just want to thank Chicago Title for sponsoring this program, and would turn things back over to Nancy for announcement of the drawing winners.
Okay. Hold on to your hats while I run through these. Jennifer Scott, Jim Saintsing, Heather Klein, John Wright, Julian Robb, Askazi Arnett, Bob Slug, Virginia Burrows, Zach Moretz, Stephen Pritchard, Shanna Fisher, Vince Durham, Nathaniel Jones, Nate Cook, Robert Hobbs, Melissa Gott, Lewis Fisher, Marissa Hill, Ryan Weeks, and Libby Gilbert.
All right, well, that's great. Well, congratulations, everybody, for the prize winners. Again, just be on the lookout for information about entry into the Hurricanes hockey tickets drawing that we'll have hopefully by the end of this month, and we'll make announcements after that. And until we meet again next time for Return to the Vault program, hope everybody has a good rest of their week.